I don't really know how to start shows.
Come on now, don't start liking me now.
So yeah, I'm funny compared to, well, you'll see later. I stand for mayhem!
I know a lot of fucking idiots that think a lot of shit is mean-spirited just because it goes against what they believe. But the relief of comedy is it take things that aren't funny and it allows us to laugh about them for an hour.
We got a purple suit to buy and a gigantic coffin.
Why are you laughing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Why Are You Laughing? A history of comedy podcast outside of the vaulted podcast studios again. We are in Coney Manor, as he calls it. And today I'm pleased to introduce you to Otto and George, Bob Levy, and the legend, Rich Voss. Mike and Craig with me yet again. Hello, boys.
Hello.
I like to pretend we haven't been with each other for the last hour and a half. So when I was preparing this episode, it was originally going to be a few people have reached out to me over the last few months and suggested Otto and George. You got to do Otto and George. Mm-hmm. A few people have also said you got to do the Reverend Bob Levy. And I had planned on my own to do eventually Rich Voss. But as I was kind of putting together the Otto and George episode, I was like, I don't know a ton about him, and I didn't know a ton about Bob Levy, and I do know a ton about Rich Voss, but I the more I was thinking about them, I was like, can I do a whole episode around each of them? Yeah. And then I was like, why not combine them? Because they're similar enough guys where you can kind of talk about their careers in similar lights. I think Voss is a class above the other two, certainly as a comedian, and even just as notoriety probably is more well-known than the other two. But I think there's definitely a common link there that made me think like, we'll just do the episode about all three and see how it goes. So,
and they're all bench guys.
Yeah, and it's guys people wanted to hear from, but maybe not the full hour necessarily.
Yeah. We'll call this episode the Six Man.
Yeah, kind of just like road dogs, really, that are grizzling out on the road.
Journeyman.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll start with Otto and George. Who
funny Jeff Dunham?
If you're not aware of the great Otto Peterson, who we lost in early 2014, I think. They call him an X-rated ventriloquist, which I feel like isn't X-rated like pornography. You know, was he inserting in George? Did I miss that act? It seems like R-rated would fit more. Like he curses a lot.
Or NC-17.
Yes.
Well, he did his whole act with his fist up his ass. So.
That is true.
I don't know.
Yeah, there was literally penetration. So he was like a dirty ventriloquist, basically, which I don't know of a lot of other ones. And so Otto was a guy who dropped out of high school when he was like 13, 14 years old and just started... They said, we might have a clip of Norton talking about it later, but Otto never worked like a regular job. He dropped out of high school and became a street performer when he was a kid, which is wild. And it's weird. And they talked about this. When I think of Otto, I know that he was alive in my lifetime. And I know that he died young, 8 years ago or whatever. But yet I think of him as like a 1920s
vaudevillian
Catskills comedian, and he literally started in the Catskills, I guess. So he's a very old timey kind of a guy, and I think the main similarity between a lot of these guys is they are guys that would kill in a bar. If you were just out drinking one night with these guys, they would be slaughtering. You know what I mean? Like their material may not warrant them being the most famous stand-ups of all time, but they're genuinely just funny, filthy maniacs.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And Otto and George and Bob Levy each had like a different style than like just being an average stand-up.
Right. Yeah. So, Otto was a kid when he started, was a street performer, and then kind of realized a way to set himself apart would be by doing just filthy jokes. And the weird thing that was noted, like his dolls cost, which seemed like a lot back in
back then for sure,
mid-70s. Yeah. $300 per dummy, and he was going through a lot of them. Wow. Which seems like a lot for a child high school dropout, But the best story, probably, which I think you might have to skip ahead a little, Craig, but we do have a clip of oh no, you know what? I didn't have this pulled because it was easy enough for me to just tell rather than some asshole telling it. But Otto, when he was like 18, 19 years old, was still a street performer and was doing his act out in some park in New York. I don't know if it was Central Park, but it was like an outdoor kind of venue in New York City. And he said he was making some Puerto Rican joke, and there was a Puerto Rican guy in the audience, and the guy gets up and starts screaming at him. And Otto, or George, is still making jokes in the fucking weird George voice. And
actually wasn't bad.
And the Puerto Rican gentleman stabbed the doll. Starts stabbing him, and I guess legend has it that Otto in that moment, or George in that moment, looks up at the audience and goes, "This fucker thinks I'm real."
Imagine being so dumb you stab a puppet,
or just so filled with rage.
So mad.
Hey, your friend here is all right. He has some manners.
he's just falling for it. It's insanity.
You can learn from your buddy here. So yeah, Otto and George's shtick was that Otto was kind of just the straight man, I guess, and the doll would have horrible, racist, sexist, fucking crazy, offensive material. So what's the first clip? Is it just a little bit of his stand-up?
Yeah, on Letterman. So
this is different than what he found this very challenging, I guess, going on Letterman. So because you can't be Otto and George, like you got to clean yourself up a little bit. But he did it, as the joke that I pulled will show. I think he did a pretty good job of it, and he also kind of just ripped the experience. So Letterman, evidently, this is like 2007, 2008, and Letterman is doing Ventriloquist Week. Which is, if you know anything about Letterman, you know right off the bat, this is him mocking these people. Like, he's having them on to be like, "You believe this motherfucker with a dummy?" And I don't know if he knew who Otto and George was, when he booked them. Like, I don't know if he thought of them as just a regular ventriloquist act or what. But Otto picked up on the fact that, like, hey, Ventriloquist Week is just mocking what we do. And so he went out and shit on the entire experience and said Letterman was falling asleep at his desk and was making bald jokes about Paul Schaefer, and just, like, ripped the, he mocked the fact that, I forget in the Leno Letterman episode if we mentioned that Letterman keeps his studio freezing, because he thinks that's better for laughter. Like, you're on your toes, I guess. And he mocked that entirely, which is something Letterman took very seriously. So he just went out and kind of shit on the whole experience. But this is an example of the type of joke, like, he was able to, clean up for network television.
So, what do you got planned for Valentine's Day? Well, me and my girlfriend like to eat, so I'm going to take her to a nice restaurant for a romantic candlelit dinner, followed by a smooth elevator ride up to the room, and then we're going to watch the Letterman show. Well, of course, yeah. And as she talks when it's on, I'm going to crack her skull open with an ashtray. That sounds real romantic. Just don't curse. Yeah, I can't curse that Entertainment Tonight can show Britney Spears Velcro when she's getting out of the car with no underwear on.
So what I like there is just the idea of saying, like, we can't curse on network television, so I will threaten domestic violence and bring up Britney Spears' snatch.
You call it Velcro?
Yeah.
So that's another thing about these guys, and like Artie Lang is another one that's kind of in that category. I'm trying to think of others, but just these sort of old school guys that have brilliant ways of referring to things, like referring to a pussy as Velcro, or something like that. Like that's part of their brilliance. Nick DiPaolo is another one.
Yeah.
Where like he'll just say some horrible phrase, but it makes you laugh because it's like, well, how would you even think of connecting that?
My favorite one when he was talking about bleaching assholes, he's like, yeah, because each one of their assholes looks like a used up coffee filter.
So what's the next clip that we have?
Polar bear joke.
Let's get back to that in a minute, but we have a clip of his just regular stand-up, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
so let's play that just to kind of contrast that with like the network set that we heard. Let's hear what his more typical set was like, so you can get an idea.
Right,
Thank you. It's really great to be here tonight. My name's Otto Peterson. This is my good friend George Dudley. How you doing, George? Nervous?
Hey, I gotta work with your hand in my ass. I'm fucking uncomfortable here. Gotta take a shit and everything.
Sorry.
I had a ride here in the trunk of the car. It sucked. It was boring. I turtle waxed my dick. I was so fucking bored in there. Johnson's turtle wax, 3 coats. I want to see the water jumping off of it. That's right, I got a wooden cock. I was circumcised with a pencil sharpener. At least I stay hard when I'm drunk.
Laugh it up, you fucking hard-ons. George, please watch it. There are ladies here.
There's ladies here? Blowjobs. Protein Slurpees. Check it out. Who saw this movie? E.T. Goes Down. Blowjobs. My girlfriend gave me skull last night. She did a good job. When she was done, my cock looked like a totem pole and her face looked like a glazed donut.
Protein Slurpees as a reference to a blowjob is another good example of what we're talking about. Just the imagery that these geniuses are able to paint.
Speaking of imagery, it plays a lot better on stage, I think, than it did on TV, because you can see him moving around. But I bet if you're sitting on in the audience watching him on stage, you wouldn't be able to see him moving his lips and stuff.
So that you brought up 2 things that I want to bring up. A, the most hilarious part about Otto and George is that Otto is not a particularly good ventriloquist.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a good ventriloquist. You can see his mouth moving the entire time.
That's why Louis J. Gomez stabbing the puppet is very funny.
Right. That would be great. But the other thing too is the reason I kind of paired these 3 that we're doing today together is they're guys that it might be a fruitless endeavor that we're doing here, because they're guys that it's very hard to appreciate just watching them on TV or something. Mm-hmm. You need to have, I can't speak to Otto and George or Bob Levy in this case, but Rich Voss, who we'll get to later, is essentially, he was like the punching bag for Opie and Anthony for a lot of years. But to their credit, they would always say, because I think Voss was very insecure about people thinking well, you just beat up on me for being dumb all the time. They're not going to go see my stand-up. Yeah. Are they going to want to say, they have an interest in seeing me? So they would kind of reinforce that by saying you got to see Voss live. Voss fucking kills, blah, blah, blah. And I'd seen some of his stuff when he was on Last Comic Standing and stuff like that. But then finally I saw him live at Skankfest, and he fucking destroyed the room. He was a murderer. And that's when I was oh, okay, there is a difference to this. And like I said, I didn't get to see these guys live, but I think that is true of Otto and George and Bob Levy a little bit. Imagine. Where if you're in the room, it's a different experience than just watching them, Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So the clip we mentioned earlier, the polar bear joke, is from the day after Otto passed away. Otto really battled with substance abuse, big drug guy. And Norton talked on this day. They did, a similar type of eulogy that they did with Patrice, but it was just lesser. It was Norton, Florentine, Bob Kelly, and Dave Attell called in. And they just kind of told Otto's stories and everything. And Jim Norton would tell stories about how, when they would hang out or do shows together, whatever, Otto would, try and get Jim to drop him off and buy drugs and shit like that. And Norton would basically be listen, I'm not going to stop you. You're an adult. I can't stop you from doing anything. If you get out of the car to buy drugs, you're not getting back in. I'm not going to give you a ride. And Otto would just get out, and that would be it. He'd find his own way home. So he was truly, dealt with a lot of substance abuse, and that seemed to play a factor in how he eventually died. But this is them kind of telling stories the day after he passed away, and I thought this is a particularly funny one from Jim Norton's memory.
Do you remember, and I didn't see this story, comedians told me, but do you remember years ago that kid got mauled in the fucking zoo by a polar bear? Right. And Otto was on stage the next night, and George's little outfit, and George's like, do you like my shoes? I got them outside the polar bear cage.
It's a type of guy we're losing, that would, his instinct is to, similar to Gilbert Gottfried, really, where his instinct is to make fun of whatever horrible tragedy happened that week as fast as he can. But it's the kind of comedy that I love. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that, like a topical joke like that, like I got these out of the side of the polar bear cage, is funnier than whatever, blowjob reference he's making or whatever, it's because it's more, I think what guys like Otto leaned on was shock value, and those are a lot more shocking than just a comedian being dirty for dirty's sake. Saying bad words. Yeah. So I believe the next clips from that same day is them talking about his confidence level.
Yep.
Yeah. So this, kind of we talk about this a lot with comedians where they never really think that they're any good. And that's almost what makes them great, but also their demise in a lot of ways. And so Otto dealt with a lot of that as well.
And he finally showed up. But I remember I would go to gigs knowing that he really might not show up, just as a fan.
Yeah, what was that about?
He was doing drugs.
That was part of it.
I think he was doing drugs at that time. Yeah. It was bad.
Because he ran out on us a few times during the NEW days. He would be killing. I said this yesterday, but you guys didn't hear probably. He would start off and he would be killing for 2 or 3 minutes, and then he would just get up and leave. And me and Ant would look at each other, and then we would learn later he thought he was sucking and was having a bad set or whatever, and the opposite was true.
That's what would happen when him in a lot of clubs. If he didn't feel like the crowd was into him, he would just get off stage. He's as a headliner, you have to do 45 minutes.
Right.
You have to do at least 45. There's no other way around it. At 20, he would just walk. Like, good night, and just fucking walk off the stage. Like, you can't. He's like, the crowd sucked. I don't fuck them. I don't care. And that, some of the clubs like, look, we can't have that. You got to do 45 minutes.
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah, you just like they were too tired. Fuck them.
What would they do?
They would just, DMC would be like out the bar. He wouldn't even know there's nobody on the stage. Everybody's running. This fucking manager's running. Get on the stage. Tell the crowd they can't leave because they got to pay their check.
Holy shit!
That's creating turmoil. Yeah, he can't just walk off. Right. Like, fucking, that crowd sucked. Fuck 'em.
I showed up at a couple of gigs after he did that, and they're like, "How much time are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm going to do an hour." Are you sure? It's
But in all fairness, he got a lot of that together.
Are you sure?
You promise?
It reminded me of the famous Larry David story where, like, when he was doing stand-up, he would just walk out, look at the crowd, sometimes be like, I'm not feeling it, and walk away. But yeah, that's the hilarious thing is, like, the tough thing that a lot of comedians deal with is, like, people are there to see you, and the only thing they're furious about is the fact that you just left in the middle of the show.
Right.
So in a weird way, now you are disappointing them when you weren't previously,
Right.
But that's particularly for a fucking drug addict. That's a tough thing to shake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Just the paranoia and fear and nervousness. But like I said, it's weird because you would think a guy like Otto would generally be killing. Because like I said, even if it's not the most well-written material all the time, there is like a shock element to it that just kind of gets an audience on his side,
Right.
I mean, there's also an element of he's saying things that'll make people stab his puppet. So it's not always the best reaction, I suppose. What clips do we have left of Otto?
Just one, and it's Opie, Opie versus Otto.
So to me, this is, if you're an Opie and Anthony fan, and in the coming weeks, don't worry, we'll get all, I know we've done a fair amount of like Opie and Anthony related and Howard Stern related stuff recently. But to me, if you're an Opie and Anthony fan, this was Otto's finest moment. So there's a compilation on YouTube of Greg Shell moments where Greg Opie Hughes was being overly sensitive. And this is what Otto said when he walked in one day. Anthony wasn't on the show. And Opie, Jim Norton, and I forget who else is in the studio at the time, but they're talking about some story from The View. Like Joy Behar was defending some comedian. Oh, how times have changed.
Yeah.
No kidding.
But so they're talking about something going on with The View, and Otto just walks in mid-conversation, and this is how it plays out.
I mean, she's annoyed because the joke was about her, but her mistake is basically saying that it's not funny and no one should think this is funny, instead of saying it wasn't funny to me.
If I was at home and this show was on TV and I couldn't find a clicker and it was a handgun on the coffee table, I'd fucking use that on myself rather than watch this show. Are you kidding me? This is what you're fucking doing when Anthony's not here? This is show into shit.
Really? That's funny, Otto.
All right, I'm sorry.
It's a viral clip, all right?
I was just kidding.
All right.
Don't be so sensitive, man. I just had a rough experience getting up here.
Your fucking codependent wife Norton begging him to get Pep back up. He's like, I'm sorry, Opie. Otto's fucking apologizing. But
a handgun on the coffee table.
On the coffee table.
I think that clip kind of perfectly encapsulates what Otto was, where like Opie has a reputation of being a sensitive Sally, not being able to take a joke, that sort of a thing. We actually did an episode on patreon.com/blindmike. The three of us did an episode last year breaking down some of Opie's sensitivities.
Oh, yeah.
So go back and watch that if you want. But I think that encapsulates who Otto was, like as a comedian, where even knowing Opie might be a little more sensitive, he walks in and plays to the like, this, what the fuck you doing? Anthony's not here. You know what I mean? Like,
the show's going to shit.
I'm going to pick up a gun and shoot myself if you put the view back on. So yeah, the main goal today with the three guys that we picked was to kind of just send you guys down a rabbit hole. So if the first few minutes on Otto and George kind of piques your interest, there's a bunch of shit on YouTube. You can go back and find of him on Opie and Anthony alone.
Great.
There was dozens and dozens of, I think like 45 appearances. They're all like an hour long.
I always wonder when he's actually in there. And they're like, and he's talking as George. I'm like, did you bring the fucking puppet with him? Or is he just doing the voice?
I'm glad you said that. That reminds me.
Is it in there with like tiny headphones?
My favorite story is sometimes George.
That'd be great.
Sometimes George would come in and he'd have George talk on mic, and that was more in the WNEW days when it was a little less of a natural conversation,
right?
And you could perform a little more. And then George would talk less on air, but George would always come in with him. It was Otto and George coming in. And I remember Anthony telling a story, the most bizarre part and my absolute favorite characteristic of Otto Peterson and George was that so during a commercial break, they'd just be shooting the shit. Mm-hmm. And Otto would be complaining about his girlfriend or talking about the weather, just like as we're talking right now. He'd just be kind of chit-chatting. And meanwhile, Anthony would notice there was never a reference to this made. No one addressed it or anything. But the newspaper would be laid out in front of George, and the puppet would be reading it. So Otto's talking like this and turning the puppet's head and working his eyes.
That's so funny.
Reading the newspaper, and it was for no one. No one mentioned it. No one talked about it.
That is so funny.
So there's an element there of both being hilarious and also a little bit psychotic, because there's another clip I didn't include of him with David Copperfield. And Copperfield was a big Otto and George fan, and I believe bought or just maybe Otto gave him like the original George doll. Yeah. And in that clip, you kind of see Otto like talking to him, like, "Hey, buddy, how's it going?" Like, like it's a weird little thing where you're almost like, is he crazy? Is he playing along with what the fuck is going on? But I just love the idea of George reading the newspaper as everyone else is talking.
I never heard that before. That's funny.
That's wicked funny.
So that's Otto for you. Like I said, go down an Otto and George rabbit hole if you're so inclined. Yeah. And now we will move to the Reverend Bob Levy, who I did not know this about Bob Levy. I assumed Bob Levy was like a road guy from the 80s who's just always been in comedy. I didn't realize, and I knew he was involved with
I thought too.
I knew he was involved with the Howard Stern show, but I didn't realize like he wasn't a comedian until he started sending the Howard Stern show jokes. Now we could probably also do 40 minutes on how bizarre it is that a radio show had writers. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That a live conversational radio show was getting jokes mailed in from Bob Levy. Like he's fucking Carson. But yeah, Bob Levy would send in jokes and parody songs. And he was a filthy guy, so it fit the Howard Stern show well. And then eventually Bob started coming in, and he was doing comedy, so he'd come to promote dates and things like that. And Jackie Martling started calling him a reverend because it was the opposite of who he was on stage. He was a filthy guy, and that nickname stuck, I guess, Reverend Bob Levy. So yeah, I thought that was very interesting that he was like a writer for the Howard Stern show. And boy, that loyalty was really paid off in both directions, as we'll find as we go along here. But Bob was also a high school dropout. He had a wrestling background, I guess. He wrestled under the name Bobby Slayer or something like that, which I didn't know that either. Like
professional wrestling.
Yeah, you can now that I know that, you can kind of see it. He's a bombastic, loud, confident guy. He'll throw out some threats, which even via email, which like I said, we'll get to. But like I can see that a little bit now that I know. or I would think maybe even more wrestling manager type of guy. But yeah, so he's a high school dropout. And the best clip that I think shows that off a little bit is from the Howard Stern show, goofing on his ability to read. So I guess, I don't know, I forget how much setup is actually in this clip, but when Artie Lang wrote his first book, Artie got lazy with doing the audiobook version. So he had guys like Bob Levy and Baba Booey read a couple chapters. And this is Bob's... the raw version of his reading of Artie Lang's book.
Bob Levy attempting to read Artie's book. I feel so bad for the engineer in this clip, and stop me if it starts to get boring to you, but I'm fascinated.
You are off the map, completely
incommunicado.
Okay, completely incommunicado.
One more on it.
What is it called?
Incommunicado. Completely incommunicado. Levy's like proud to be an imbecile.
What is it called again?
Incommunicado.
And I just got a copy of the audiobook, and it's funny. It's like, it's Levy's name in big letters. Like, he's got credits on the front. I paid him pretty well for it, for a session. I don't know.
Completely incommunicado. You take somebody by both sides of the head and introduce. You take somebody by both sides of the head and what the fuck? How the fuck is Druce introduce?
What?
Okay.
Both of their head, stop, and introduce their nose. You take someone by both sides of their head.
Okay. You take somebody by both sides of the head and introduce their nose
and introduce their nose to your kneecap.
And introduce their nose to your kneecap.
One more.
Yeah. And introduce your nose to their kneecap.
Well, introduce your nose to your kneecap.
This is painful.
And introduce your nose to their kneecap.
Introduce their nose to your kneecap.
Okay. And introduce your nose, their nose. Okay. And introduce their nose to your kneecap. And looked up at me as I began. And looked up at me. And look, you motherfucker. And looked up at me as I began. And looked up at me as I began.
And looked up at me as I began reciting them.
And looked up at me as I began and looked up at me as I began.
And looked up at me as I began reciting.
This must have taken hours.
And looked up at me as fuck me. And looked up at me as I began reciting them.
Great, man.
Wow.
Oh,
great.
No.
Way to go.
He's praising him.
Like a second grade teacher.
Listen,
Oh, boy.
Great job, buddy. So I apologize for that clip being so
Sounded
long.
out.
I didn't know where to stop it. Like, there's no point where you can stop because it's just endless idiocy. But what it reminded me of is, did you ever see that clip of Michael Jordan, the Gatorade commercial?
Is it
Gatorade?
in you?
Is it in you? Is it in you?
Is it in you?
No, Gatorade. Is it in you? Is
Gatorade.
it in you? Like, Michael, how are you not getting this?
Is it in you?
But yeah, I think that
Eddie Murphy comes out. It better not be through.
Now, people aren't going to get that. We're recording these back to back, folks. Remember,
This is after.
yes, it is. So yeah, that's kind of the character that Bob Levy became on the Howard Stern show. He was a big dope that they goofed on, but they would promote his road dates and everything. And then he became such a figure in that world that he was like, he would host the roasts that they did. Like, if you remember the Geraldo episode, we played a clip of Geraldo roasting like Baba Booey, and Bob Levy would host those. And he had a show on Howard 101, the Miserable Men show, and he would do like pretty regular guest spots with Howard Stern and everything. So he was a big part of that world, like a AAA Gilbert Gottfried kind of a thing. You know what I mean?
AAA.
Like, where Gilbert was in there pretty regularly and considered one of the best guests ever. Bob Levy was more like a borderline guest whack-packer type of thing.
Gotcha.
And he would do goofy shit like he got in a fight with Danny Bonaducci and fucking slapped Danny Bonaducci and then boxed him. I think he lost in celebrity boxing to Danny Bonaducci. And he would fight with Beetlejuice. Like, he stole Beetlejuice's hotel room or something. Like, he's a weird character. And the more I listened to a lot of these Stern clips, the more I realized how much of a whack packer he was, rather than like,
Part of the show.
yeah, like that they viewed him more as a whack packer than a genuine like guest or anything like that. By the way, side note, this is just dawning on me. I did Bob Levy's radio show at one point. I forget. He asked me to come on for like some cancel culture topic when I was like 20 years old, and I called in. So I had his phone number for a while, but I lost it, so I couldn't ask him to be on this episode. But yeah, so he was a fixture on the Howard Stern show, and like I said, people have reached out to me and been like, "You got to do the Reverend Bob Levy for an episode." So that's why we included it in this little montage. Is the next clip the Chappelle thing?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we mentioned this in the joke stealing episode. I found a different clip of Artie kind of laying out the story, because this leads to a him versus Artie fight. But this is Artie telling the story of Bob Levy accusing Chappelle of joke thievery.
Going on there.
No, but from being on the road a lot, you start to get that brother mentality where you get vicious with people, and there's this argument, this issue has been going on forever, and I'm being honest with him. I say, look, I don't think you have a good argument in this. The Dave Chappelle joke that he claimed Dave Chappelle on his show ripped off a joke that Bob wrote, and the joke is, I'm so horny when I get home, I'm going to beat my dick like it owes me money. Okay? And so that showed up in a Chappelle show, an episode of the Chappelle show. Levy and me, a few days after it aired, had a gig together, and he goes, yeah, I'm furious with Chappelle. And I'm like, why? I don't know if he's ever met him, I don't know. Why are you furious with him? He goes, well, he's going to hear from me. He stole one of my jokes on his show. And I go, what joke? And he goes, the joke.
Beat your dick.
Yeah. And I said, Bob, listen, man, I don't know if you should fight this battle. And he's like, why? What are you talking about? I don't, are you sure you wrote that joke? I said, that sounds like one of those public domain type, you know what I mean?
It sounds old.
And then he got, right, it sounds like, it was at the first ever Friars Club dinner they were using that. And he's like, no. And I saw he was very defensive about the fact that he wrote that joke. And then I said, well, listen, Bob, I hate to buzz your bubble, but I've heard other people say that before me and you started working together, because me and Levy started working together about when I started here.
Right.
And he goes, well, they stole it from me. And I go, all right. So I could see he was passionate about it.
Yeah,
and
so
I kind of laid off. And then I heard Chappelle, and then Chappelle was going to be a guest on the show. And Levy said he's going to call in. I said, Bob, please don't do that. It's not. You're not going to look great doing that. It can't. Because he goes, no. So I went back and I saw the episode of the Chappelle show where Chappelle uses it. And it's said by this, like, puppet who's supposed to be playing like a bad, hacky comedian.
Oh, is that the end of the clip?
Yeah.
What Artie's saying there, by the way, is not 100% true. The character wasn't like a comedian, but it was supposed to be like an old, like, homeless guy or something like that on fake Sesame Street.
Also, he was herpes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it wasn't so much a hack, but it was Chappelle using it in not a way of like, this is a hilarious joke. It's like, this would be something funny for a real creepy kind of...
I'm pretty sure on the Chappelle episode, we played the phone call.
Yes, we did. I remember it.
No, we played it in the joke stealing episode.
Joke stealing
episode. No, we did. Yeah, we played their confrontation, so you can go back and hear that too if you want.
Yeah, because Chappelle's like, shut up. And then he's like, no, it's Bob Levy. He's like,
it's Bob Levy? You can tell his attitude. He was like, I don't want to shit on the guy. But yeah, it's funny what a fucking maniac Bob Levy was, that he wants to like take to task Dave Chappelle for this fucking joke.
Throwaway joke.
Where it's like... And the idea of Artie saying, like, I've heard other people do that, and him Levy replying, like, well, then they stole it from me. And it's like, no, Artie's saying, like, fucking guy, like, Dangerfield probably told a similar joke to that, but it's like, he was a madman. And again, this is all kind of building up to his maddest of madman attacks, but we will get there. I think the next clip is him versus Baba Booey, right?
Yeah.
So... This is what I always say when people are like, you should get paid for going on Kirk's show or whatever. It's like, well, I am, because the reason people subscribe to this show is because I'm on that show. So the idea of exposure was very important to a lot of comedians back then. And going on the Howard Stern show, in Howard's mind, was payment, because you say, hey, go see Bob Levy at Rascals this weekend, and then his fans would go fill that place up, and in Howard's mind, that's how we're paying Bob Levy. But Bob would get very upset if he wasn't granted the loyalty that he felt he deserved sometimes, and he took issue with Baba Booey not having him in as often as he liked to be.
After all the shit that I do, I ask, can I come in for 15 minutes and fucking just plug this fucking thing? I got an email back that, oh no, we're a little too busy this month. Oh yeah? Oh, let me see. Who the fuck is on then, okay? Who are these superstars?
Email from who? From who?
From Gary.
Okay.
You can't give me fucking 15 minutes after all these years being your fucking guy. Your fucking guy, as you say. I'm your fucking guy. I talked to Artie today. Artie's 100% on my side saying that it's a disgrace for them to fucking even say no to me. It's a fucking disgrace to give me 15 minutes.
You know, why don't we just open up the door to Bob Levy and
come in anytime?
Anytime, because Bob should be on at any given second.
Well, I don't think he's asking for any time.
I miss Cunty Howard.
No, first of all, let me tell you something. We have Bob on. Well, let Bob finish. In all fairness, I like Bob, so I'm not going to get worked up.
Bachelor party for me. Fucking shove it up your fucking asses, okay?
But let me
fuck it. I was doing my wedding and that shit. Fuck it. I'm getting married next week. I save all this shit for them. Fuck it. I'm not saving anything. Everything's here. I don't need to be fucking loyal to one fucking show for fucking all these years and get smacked in the fucking face. Nobody else that comes onto that fucking show sits there, writes bits for nothing, does shit for nothing, comes up here to film a 10-second intro to a fucking roast show when I'm 3 hours away for nothing. I've been doing this for fucking years, and you ain't gonna fucking smack me in the fucking face by telling me you don't got 15 minutes for me. Fuck you. Fuck you.
So what I think of with Levy is like, as we've talked about with the dice, where you forget he's playing a character. Like he's kind of become that character over the years, where he's adopted that personality. But with a guy like Levy, I wonder way more. I always like, is he this guy, or is he aware that he's putting on a performance? Like, is he aware that he's being entertaining right now, or is he a genuine madman?
He sounded truly mad.
Yeah, I think he's a wacko.
He sounds like a madman, and like I said, we keep building to what he eventually did. There's a lot of guys that you might say were unjustifiably kicked off the Howard Stern show. Like with Gilbert, when Gilbert passed away, it didn't make a lot of sense in the last few years of Gilbert's life why he wasn't on the Howard Stern show. He gave them a lot of great radio. With Bob Levy, something happened that I can understand why he was not on that program anymore. But before we get there, were there any more clips, or is this the last Bob Levy?
This is the last one.
So
him talking about leaving Howard.
Yeah, so this is, to be fair, Bob saw the writing on the wall that they weren't having his type of comedian on anymore. Persona non grata in the Howard Stern world. If you were dirty or weird, or just fit a mold that Howard no longer wanted to associate with, you were out. So Bob said, I know how I get their attention.
Was there one final thing that happened that, caused you not to be involved, or was it part of the evolution of where he is now?
Well, I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm just saying I wasn't happy with what it was going, and, I'm not one that likes to be told what to do like everyone else and how to fucking behave, and, I think I'm pretty good.
Were they orchestrating what you were doing now? Like it was.
Well, they would say, "Hey, you're a little too much sometimes." You know what I mean? Well, you can't do this. You can't. And
it's a fucking Howard Stern show.
I don't know what the word "can't" means.
I read something. Is this true that you threatened to murder him and his wife?
I said I would.
They took it seriously.
Of course they did. Because look, if I told the people that came, the NYPD claimed in my house, and I said,
after you said that,
I said if I wanted him dead, he'd be dead. I wouldn't have said it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they said that's cool, but you really can't say that either. And I was like, no, it's cool. It's like, look, I just got mad, and I was trying to get him to say, hey, let's talk, or me talk to somebody and tell my side of the story. But it was wrong. I was on Xanax at the time. It was a bad thing I did, But they said I beat up 5 security guards outside, and that's why I was banned from the building. So I couldn't go on Opie and Anthony. So it's all these little lies that just say, fuck it, I walk away.
Yeah.
I walk away.
That frail old woman beat up 5 security guards?
Well, listen, he's tangoed with drugs and alcohol over the years. He's had his struggles. He had some health issue recently that I know some guys were trying to do a fundraiser for. So he's been sick the last few years.
Ovarian cancer?
I cannot confirm or deny. I don't know. But it's hilarious to me to be like, so I said I'd kill Howard and his wife, and they don't want me in the building anymore. And they took, Bob, I don't think they had to lie to get you out of the building. You threatened murder of their biggest employee. So he was a true fucking nut. But a very funny guy, a very weird character. Like I said, the point of today is to lead you guys down some rabbit holes you may not have otherwise gone down. And that reading clip that we put in, that 2-minute reading clip, the full video on YouTube is like an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, Jesus.
So if you want to hear Howard, Robin, and Artie breaking down Bob Levy reading in excruciating detail, then feel free to go back and do that. But like I said, you can go back and look at the roast or the weird shit he did on Howard.
Something tells me Mike's not going to go listen to it.
No,
you're more than welcome to if you'd like.
The only one I ever got through was when was the Orson Welles one with the champagne.
Get me a jury.
Yeah. Oh, that one.
Get me a jury. Yeah. So Bob Levy, quite a weird character as well. But now we go into the king of the idiots, and that would be the great legend, Rich Voss, who is
on the TV behind us right now.
Probably not even fair to include Rich in this, but I did.
Definitely not.
It was just an excuse to talk about Rich Voss, who is, at the very least, he does fit the category of underappreciated road comics. Like the fact that Voss is as funny as he is and as big a name as he is, and still, promotes dates at some fucking restaurant in New Jersey is bizarre to me. Like he should be much bigger than he is. And him and Bonnie should have some show together. Together they're very funny. His wife, Bonnie McFarlane. So it's strange that they haven't picked up on, a way to use Rich Voss in, Hollywood. But we certainly appreciate him here. For multiple reasons. Like I said, he's a killer stand-up. He's a very funny guy, good roaster. In fact, we said, I think we told one of his jokes in the Geraldo episode where Geraldo was supposed to be at the roast the day after he died. I'm sorry, not a roast. It was just some comedy event. Oh, it was a benefit for like AA or alcoholism.
Something like that. Yeah.
And so Voss just walks out. And everyone's obviously in the comedy community is obviously very sad. And Voss says, Greg Giraldo was booked here, and they asked him if he'd come on the show, and he said, "Over my dead body." Like 18 hours after he died.
That's very funny.
Mike, is Rich a high school dropout?
Yes.
So all three of these guys are high school dropouts.
Yes, I planned it that way. Yes.
That's the name of the
high
show.
High school dropout, drug addict, road comedians. That's what I was doing.
All right.
But yeah, Rich is a high school dropout. He was a crack addict.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
How do you forget?
That's right.
That's why he talks the way he does.
37 years sober or something like that. He's been sober for nearly 4 decades. But yeah, he was addicted to crack. And anytime he's on a show with an alcoholic, he's like, yeah, try fucking, sucking dick for crack. But which he has not done, but he has worn Daisy Dukes to get the attention of a gay drug dealer, apparently.
Yes.
He would parade around in short shorts to get this gentleman's attention, which is another great story that I didn't include in this, but I probably should have. But what we did start with Voss is probably my favorite moment in Rich Voss, Opie and Anthony history. So Voss was there on Sex for Sam when we talked about that. He's a staple. Honestly, I would say after Jim Norton, the comedian most closely associated with Opie and Anthony would be Rich Voss.
Absolutely.
I put Patrice above him.
Patrice too, but I think Voss might be ahead of Patrice.
Voss did it longer.
He had more years,
In my eyes, it's the three of them, Patrice, then
yeah,
Voss.
but I'm not talking favorites. I'm saying, like, if you think of the Opie and Anthony show and you're listing comedians, it would be Norton and then Voss, I would think. But yeah, Patrice is certainly up there as well.
Bobby Kelly,
Colin Quinn,
tough crowd.
Bill Burr, Louis. You forget they were on for a long time. But you know what you forget too? A quick side note is that Bill Burr was filling in for Norton for a long time.
Yeah,
and they even had like a fake campaign of like, should Bill Burr replace Jim Norton? That sort of thing.
Right.
So you forget what a staple he was on that show too.
Was he still Billy Burr back then?
Yeah. They all call him Billy.
Yeah. So Voss is on the Opie and Anthony show, and like I said, one of the tropes of his character, because he's really he has a 141 IQ in real life. As he said, he's apparently took an IQ test online and scored 141, which is like Mensa level. Like, that's a true genius.
I'm a fucking genius guy.
So he has an album called 141 IQ, I believe. But yeah, Opie and Anthony would make fun of him for being dumb. And this is a day they have him on. And keep in mind when you hear some of the way this is being promoted, Twitter is very new. This is like 09, 2010-ish. And Twitter's very new, so the lingo is a little bit different. And this is Rich Voss trying to promote his social media.
Rich Voss on MySpace.
Yeah.
What's your Twitter thing?
I don't fucking Twitter. Rich Voss, Twitter. I don't know how
What do
you
you
do
mean
that.
you don't Twitter?
I Twitter all
You
the
don't
time.
know
I got
how to-
fucking. I love it.
So I'm asking you what
Wait,
you're...
you just say you don't know how to do that.
No, I don't know. You can give a Twitter address.
Nobody
Holy
acknowledged you
shit.
talked.
I don't know.
No promotion for your Twitter today. Fuck
Twitter
you.
Rich Voss, I guess.
No,
How
it's
is it?
not that.
What is it?
It's certainly not that.
Did you pick a name when you signed up for Twitter?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh my God! Don't you know what? You don't get the promotion for your Twitter.
Comic 630.
That's your Twitter name?
Sounds odd.
Hold on.
Sounds a little odd, right?
Sure does.
Comic 630, why would you choose that as your Twitter handle? Who would know you as that? So it sounds a little weird. Maybe you at home picked up immediately on what he did. The Opie and Anthony fans certainly, during the commercial break, were able to penetrate that mind of Rich Voss and figure out why he said Comic 630. So his Twitter handle is it's at Rich Voss. You can give him a follow still today. Yep. But the astute pests of Opie and Anthony were able to pick up on what Rich Voss just did.
He's very lucky you can follow him today.
Yeah, right.
What you did. Jimmy doesn't even have an idea. You both were out of the studio, right? What is your Twitter name?
Like, if someone wants to see your Twitter, what would they have to type in to see your Twitter?
Wait till you hear this one, Jimmy. What is your Twitter name?
Rich Voss.
So that you can go to www.twitter.com/Rich Voss.
And you can start following Rich Voss.
Yeah.
Okay, so what
was the thing you said earlier?
And what was the thing earlier?
Oh.
What was the comic thing?
I don't know. Don't say it because it might be something else.
Oh, it might be?
No, it is something else.
And
You
everyone
idiot.
fucking picked up on it, and they are hacking the shit out of your
Let me
Twitter
explain.
right now.
Rich Voss gave out his password for his Twitter account.
And that comic thing that he gave out earlier was his password.
So they don't quite know yet. Comic 630 was not just Rich Voss's Twitter password. It was his password for Twitter, Facebook, all social media, but also like his booking, like his hotel booking, whatever site he, like Expedia password, whatever the fuck it was, things that had his credit card information. The password was Comic 630. People were like just going to a website, putting in Voss's email and Comic 630 and hoping it worked, and it often did. So they just spent the next like hour fucking with him.
Not only that, the guy who hacked it, changed the password, called in, and they were telling him what to tweet from Rich's account.
Yeah, so he would put up just pictures. He would promote Jim Norton's dates.
Yeah, you could tell Jimmy's mean laugh came out.
And so luckily, a true fan, not some fucking psychopath, a true fan got it, gave them the password back. And then they were able to get Voss's Twitter back, but they had quite a lot of fun in the meantime. So that led to, in the same day, the next clip is from the same day of Opie and Anthony, where Rich Voss says something that leads them to going down the laundry list of other things Rich Voss has said in the past. He made a mistake, and another word for that, Rich Voss is about to tell us.
It's just the greatest thing. A horse's ass picture. It says Rich Voss, and then a plug for Jimmy's show.
Quite a pofa.
And a bunch of gay followers.
A what?
Pofa. What's that word?
How great is it going to when you hear that clip every time a caller bombs.
Oh my God!
Hey, where's my fuck?
Oh my God!
What a fucking idiot!
I seem to have lost my fuck. Jibble.
I officially have a headache from laughing so hard. Fuck.
I made a po-fa. It's great. Eat it with chopsticks.
Oh my
God. You would think after so many years we just wouldn't be surprised or it wouldn't be funny
I think
anymore.
It's the depth of the well.
So that leads them going through the list of Vosscabulary. Just things Rich Voss has mispronounced and bungled in a magnificent way over the years. But to Voss's credit, Colin Quinn calls him the king of the comeback because he can be a fucking moron. He can be a fucking idiot, or he can be stingingly quick and mean and sharp. And even after that, like to make fun of himself, he said that he meant to say po-fa, and he said he was referring to when he was an underprivileged child. It was because of his po-fa. But he's a very funny, quick guy, but it was also funny to mock his stupidity. So, like I said, you can go down and listen to it. Find the dozens and dozens of words he's mispronounced, or they would have they would play a game where they would pull up a comedian's picture, and he would have to tell them who it was. So, for example, like Giovanni Ribisi is now in the show The Offer. Like it's a Giovanni Ribisi, and he didn't know any. Jake Gyllenhaal was a fucking disaster.
Right. Yep.
Like he couldn't say anyone's name. Yep. And so as Norton said there, the depth of the well provided them a great amount of entertainment. They did probably the most insulting thing they did to Rich Voss's intelligence was they had a competition, the annual dumb off, and it was like I don't know if it was an IQ test or just like a trivia contest, whatever it was. Rich Voss, Bob Kelly, and Bobo participated. Who Bobo was essentially Opie and Anthony's version of a whackpacker, who was a mentally hindered individual, and Bobo would beat Voss in this trivia contest, and they literally told Bob Kelly, they're like, "We just needed a third body in here. Like, you don't belong with these two fucking morons." But like I said, Voss is stingingly quick. Another thing I didn't include because we played in a previous episode was him and Patrice just destroying Dat Fan.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a thing that Voss lives in a time now where he's friends with a lot of these young comedians, and Voss is one of the last bastions of that old guard where they will bust your balls, but it means they love you. Like, they'll be brutally mean. I told this story on the Blind Mike Project before, but we were at Skankfest one year, and we saw Voss and Bonnie hosted this show called Would You Bang Him? Where it was basically just stand-up sets from male comedians, but there would be judges on stage, like female judges, or sometimes like Mateo Lane, like a gay comedian, would be a judge. And they would judge based on this comedian's set, would you fuck him, based on his act. And it was kind of a funny premise, and Voss and Bonnie were very funny hosting it. And so when he saw it, Alba was not familiar with them at all, and she ended up really liking him. And they were standing outside when the show was over, and they were in a circle of people talking, and Alba was like, "Oh, I want to tell him I'm a fan." And I was like, "Don't bother him." And she was like, "No, I'll be real quick." And she walks up to him and goes, "Hey, I was just at the show you hosted, and you were so funny, and thank you so much," and blah, blah, blah. And Voss kind of ignores her for a second and then turns to her and goes, "What do you need?" And she's like, "I was just saying you were funny." He goes, yeah. Comedians are talking, or whatever the fuck he said. And he turns around, and Alba was like heartbroken. She was like, "What an asshole!" And I was like, "No, that's the interaction you want. You don't understand.
That's perfect.
You got exactly what you wanted. You don't know that yet, but that's what you wanted."
What do you need?
So what else do we have from Voss?
History. What we have?
History.
Def Jam.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so Rich Voss was the first ever white comedian on Def Jam, which, if you don't know, the Apollo could often be a contentious atmosphere for a white comedian to walk into. And Def Jam, they'd never had a white guy before, and they got one look at Rich Voss and said, "This guy will appeal to the brothers and sisters out there." And so this is Voss. Now, you've heard how he talks naturally. For even those of you that didn't know him, you've heard how he speaks. So pay close attention to his dialect. See if he changes anything when he's on stage at the Apollo.
There you go. A lot of sisters in the house checking me out, huh? Remember, once you go white, you go right back to black. Shit, I'm not like the brothers. I'll eat the coochie, okay? That's what I'm talking about.
You can clearly hear him putting on like a black scent or whatever you want to call it, but he is still so fucking funny and knows, like, that's what a pro Voss is. Like, he's so kind of he has moments where he's so mockably dumb and whatever, so you don't think of him as like a professional, but like he's such a veteran stand-up that he knows exactly what he's gonna do. Yeah, and he's great at crowd work.
They played this for Colin Quinn.
Yeah.
And Colin called him Malcolmelian X.
Colin has the greatest references to put down his friends. Like when he called Anthony a back alley Tunisian knife fighter.
It's the best.
But yeah, like I said, Colin Quinn calls Voss the king of the comebacks because he is, for as dumb as he's kind of been portrayed, and there's a lot of volume there in material, but he is a quick, hilarious guy as well. You know, which is why if Voss is in your town, he comes to Comedy Connection once a year, I think. Yeah. So you know, if he's ever around, try and see Rich Voss if you can. Is the last one the Patrice roast?
Yep.
Is that all we had?
Yep.
So yeah, like there's millions of hours of Rich Voss on the radio, in stand up and podcast, whatever. You can find a bottomless well of Rich Voss material.
Oh yeah.
But the last one I wanted to include was just him being genuinely funny at the roast of Patrice O'Neal, which may at some point warrant an entire breakdown. Because that was also very funny. So maybe the next time we do Patrice, it might be that roast. But this is a little taste of Voss hosting that roast.
You know, it's funny when you roast somebody, it's because maybe it's their birthday, or they accomplished something in the business, or you just don't like them. Patrice, I think of 5 of the 7 deadly sins. I don't want to talk about his fucking weight, but his car has stretch marks. This fucking fat fuck should have his kitchen staple. You ever see when black guys, when they drive and they lean to be cool? He does it to keep his car level. Patrice on his career is doing fucking well, man. You can't deny that. He was in a Spike Lee movie. He was in a Meg Ryan movie. My favorite piece of work is that movie he was in with Sigourney Weaver, where you couldn't see him through the mist.
That's not funny. That's racist. Yeah, he's a fucking killer. You should check him out if you haven't before. And another, by the way, speaking of roasts, one of the best roasts done certainly in the last 20 years, like, you know, since the Rickles days, like one of the best modern roasts, I would say, is the Rich Voss roast, which is now on YouTube, that you can find it for free. And what makes it so great is that it's genuine friends busting each other's balls. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, they actually have been friends for 20 years rather than just getting, you know, Mike Tyson and Martha Stewart to roast Justin Bieber or something. You know, these people actually know each other and have things to go off of. But Voss is so funny and so underappreciated. And like I said, particularly if you enjoyed that Twitter clip, there's plenty of Opie and Anthony material to choose from if you want to go down a Voss rabbit hole as well. So you boys have anything to add on Voss or Levy or Otto and George?
I was going to say the Starbucks sets during the walkover.
Yes. Yeah, you know what? We might have mentioned that in the our very first episode when we talked about The Day the Laughter Died, where Voss would do that. He would just show up kind of as a way of showing like Voss could do stand-up anywhere, but also as a way of showing like just doing something weird with stand-up, I guess, is Voss would like walk into a Starbucks and just unannounced start doing stand-up until they asked, they asked him to leave. And he would get laughs, and he's just a funny fucking guy.
Yeah.
And like I said, Otto and George, Bob Levy, if you want to check them out as well, go down those rabbit holes. Let me know what you think of those guys. Do you think they hold up? Do you like them? Are they underappreciated? Let me know. And the best place to let me know is patreon.com/blindmike, where if you subscribe to the $10 tier, you can get episodes a week early. And if you subscribe for a year, you get 2 months free. So how can you beat that? We're practically giving this stuff away, folks. Except that we're not.
Handing it to them.
Except that but other than the fact that we're charging you, we're giving it away for free. So yeah, go to patreon.com/blindmike. It'd be much appreciated. We got merch in the store. Link is in my Twitter and Instagram bios if you want to check that out. Plenty of new Gearhead merch up. And you can also check out patreon.com/verygoodshow, where you can find these boys. And I'm told there will be a horror movie podcast up today. Is that right? You're recording right after the show? What's the matter?
That was a big bust.
Go to patreon.com/verygoodshow. Support these boys as well. And no, they are doing plenty of content up there. You can add to Mike's list, all kinds of wacky stuff. And I think that's pretty much it from me. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
Nailed it again.
All right. Subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, all those places. It helps the show. Free way to help the show if you don't want to subscribe. I understand. But support the show for free if you'd be so kind. And then we'll talk to you guys next week on Why Are You Laughing?